He was a high-rise cat burglar whose ambitions were loftier than most. Even a 30-story window was within his grasp, and he had authorities climbing the walls. He preyed on those who thought they were safe. He struck only the finest homes. He knew what he wanted and where to get it. That could be said of any cat burglar, but this man was different. He not only defied the law, he defied the law of gravity. He would climb 5 stories, 10 or more, to reach residents high above the ground. Without ropes, without a net, and without being noticed. Miami Beach, Florida may seem like paradise. But like any city, it has its share of crime. For the wealthy who live here, the balmy climate and high-rise vistas make the problems easy to overlook. The towering condos that dot these shores are like fortresses. Equipped with video cameras, security guards, and state-of-the-art alarm systems. People living in these towers felt out of harm's reach. But then, a favorite necklace would turn up missing. A favorite brooch would disappear. Without any signs of a break-in, some victims suspected their housekeepers. On November 3, 1996, Miami Beach police began to learn the truth behind the thefts. Units on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors of a Collins Avenue condominium had been robbed the night before.
And as I started to look in the box...
Don't touch. John, can you go ahead and excuse me?
The burglar had a sharp eye. He grabbed only cash and real gems, leaving the costume jewelry behind.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
The victims admitted to detectives that they never locked their balcony doors.
I see we have jewelry left there, but that's costume jewelry.
Okay. I went out to the balcony after not being able to find any forced entry to the doors, and at that time, I really went out to enjoy the view. It's pretty high up, and there's a beautiful water view.
Everything was fine until my wife noticed her.
And what I was able to see at the glass door is what we started to call the half-moon impression.
Hey, John, come out and look at this.
Where you would take your nose and smush your nose up against the glass to look in, and then put your hand up to cut the glare to look in.
It was a peculiar smudge to see outside of a 5th floor window. They found the same mark outside the other 2 units. If the balcony was the point of entry, how did the burglar get there?
And after leaning out, I noticed scuff marks that were coming up the side of the wall.
The burglar was a climber. Detectives checked the roof to see if he'd left any clues, but he apparently never made it that far.
We went up to the roof and we looked around. The scuff marks did not go that high. They were only below the 5th level, going in the downward direction.
Detectives were astonished to discover that the culprit had climbed up from the ground, spanning the 12-foot gaps between balconies. He had no drain pipe to shimmy up. There was no evidence he'd used ropes or a grappling hook. Miami Beach police weren't sure what they were dealing with. They had never seen anything like it before. They contacted other jurisdictions to see if similar burglaries had been reported.
I'll be clear from the 2200 scene.
2 weeks later, 50 miles away, a Palm Beach condo was robbed. Alerted by Miami police, investigators knew what to look for. The half-moon impression on the balcony door. The criminal's impeccable taste. And the scuff marks down the side of the building. The burglar hit 10 units in a single night. The MO was identical. The thief, whoever he was as methodical as he was agile.
He was able to pick the most expensive items, and he knew exactly where they were. He didn't have to do any ransack or any searching. No pillowcases were stolen to carry the jewelry out.
He had a system that worked. And with a range of 50 miles, the high-rise robber was going to be a challenge to catch.
We're going to enter that in.
Soon, similar break-ins were reported all over South Florida. In Fort Lauderdale, Ball Harbor, Boca Raton, and Cocoa Beach. Someone was scaling high-rises and making off with jewels.
9 o'clock tomorrow. Very good.
The robber's range spread to a 300-mile radius.
Task force tomorrow. We should have everything online.
This nightmare for law enforcement became a field day for journalists. Tessie Borden of the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel knew a good story when she heard one. She was one of the many reporters intrigued with the burglar's prowess.
And had it not been for the kind of MO that he used, it would have been another burglary story, like a lot of them in South Florida. I mean, you just don't hear of burglars climbing up the sides of buildings. In his case, from what police say, he climbed as high as 30 stories at one point. I couldn't do that.
Along with millions in jewels, he stole the public's imagination. Though the police tried to downplay the story, this bigger-than-life villain soon earned a nickname.
The police were describing his MO, and I think at one point one of the reporters said, "Oh, you mean like Spiderman?" And the police said, "Yeah." And from then on, he was known as Spiderman.
Spiderman cast his web far and wide. It was only a matter of time until somebody spotted him. While South Florida police cast their dragnet, Spiderman conducted his business as usual. But one night, he was caught off guard. A man in Miami was the first to catch a glimpse of the notorious burglar, but just a glimpse. In a flash, Spiderman slipped down 8 stories and disappeared into the night. The witness saw enough to provide a composite sketch. Now, police knew to look for a muscular black male, 180 to 200 pounds, in his mid-20s to early 30s. Soon, other witnesses saw him too. They confirmed what investigators could hardly believe. He scaled the buildings without ropes or tools, relying totally on his own body strength. He climbed higher and higher, getting away with millions. The well-to-do, who paid a premium for the security of their luxury towers, found they weren't getting the protection they had paid for.
They were just in amazement that anybody could scale that high and come into their little corner of the world. People that live in the condos that we spoke to felt that because they lived high up, they had their own little security force, they felt that they were immune to the outside world violating them.
Spiderman had South Florida's undivided attention. Each caper became a media event.
I never, locked the sliding doors. I mean, 4th floor.
But that all changed after she became a victim of the now infamous Spiderman. Cleaned out of her jewelry last fall, police say Spiderman paid her condo a repeat visit just 3 weeks ago.
I'm still, I'm scared, living here. Everything is locked. I feel like I'm in jail, living in my own place.
More than a year had passed since police first suspected a climber. Spiderman had struck dozens of buildings, but police were no closer to catching him. The break-ins were so clean, some victims didn't realize they were hit until long after.
There were several instances in which police didn't get the report of the theft until several weeks later, when the victims noticed that a particular piece of jewelry was missing. And they looked for it in their safe, they looked for it in their bank box, and they never found it. So then they reported it missing. By that time, it was probably already sold.
How you doing? Is the manager in? Thank you. How you doing, sir? Yeah.
Police visited several pawn shops and jewelry stores, but did not find any of the stolen jewelry. Spiderman was becoming as mythical and mysterious as his comic book namesake.
How you doing today?
He appeared to be unstoppable. As Spiderman's trail grew cold, the public's interest in the thefts heated up.
Last week, Spiderman has struck again in Miami, hitting apartments in this Coconut Grove building and this building in Brickell. At this Brickell Avenue high-rise, Spiderman started off easy enough, scaling the walls to a 3rd-floor balcony, then going 1 floor up to apartment 402, then 7 stories higher to the 11th floor.
By early 1998, police sought a pattern to the Spiderman's capers. They reviewed every case report and re-interviewed the victims, hoping to find something they may have overlooked. They discovered that Spiderman had stolen something more than jewels and cash.
How about the credit cards?
The credit cards. Oh, yes, the credit cards.
Detectives interviewed 40 to 50 of the Spiderman's victims and learned that besides their cash and jewels, many had taken another hit. He had stolen their credit cards. They didn't realize it until a month or 2 later when they received their bills. At that point, they contacted their credit card companies, but not the police.
Nothing they're going to do about it.
Credit card transactions are easier to track than cash or jewels. Many of the purchases occurred at Villaman Tires. 7 charges totaling $10,000 had been made in a 2-week period. The proprietor remembered the transactions. The buyer, a black man, had ordered custom mag gold and silver rims for a green Ford Explorer. He returned on several occasions to purchase more tires and rims.
Okay, can you give me a printout or something?
Investigators hoped their efforts were about to pay off. Detectives combed the neighborhood looking for the green Explorer. Finding no sign of the vehicle, they tried a different approach. The driver of the Explorer had made several charges at a gas station in Miami Lakes. That's where Hallman began spending his lunch hour.
After a month or so at sitting at the Amoco, it seemed a little bleak, but I still had hope. I said, eventually, this vehicle is going to roll in here.
Just sitting around here doing this.
Finally, a car matching the description pulled in to fill up. A black male was driving it. Hallman thought he had found his Spider-Man. But his hopes were dashed in an instant.
Tango Lima 261.
He was 6 foot tall, and he was just too big to do any type of climbing.
Even so, Hallman decided to trail the Explorer. They were led to a house in Oakland Park. Moments later, Hallman's hunch was confirmed when a man matching the description of Spider-Man left the house. He drove off in another vehicle. Detectives followed. The driver stopped at 2 houses in a suburb of Dade County. When detectives called in the addresses, they learned that both belonged to a man named Derek James.
No traffic, that's unnecessary place.
A background check revealed that real estate wasn't his only passion. James had 18 felony convictions, including one in 1994 for stealing $25,000 worth of jewelry. In the 1994 arrest report, Detective Hallman found what he was looking for.
In the officer's comments, he wrote that Derek James had paint transfer on his clothing as if he had laid or slid against a wall. So that was our first indication that he may in fact be a climber. We have apartments that are burglarized, we have jewelry that's taken, and the paint transfer really perked our interest.
The report suggested that Derek James may have been climbing at least since 1994, but he'd been falling long before his arrest. In the 1980s, James had trained as an Army paratrooper and had made hundreds of jumps. He was no stranger to heights. Investigators had enough evidence on James to get a court order to put a tracking device on his SUV. They assembled a surveillance team to keep their eye on him. June 21st, 1998, Derek James was on the move. The surveillance team was trailing him, hoping to catch the Spider-Man in action.
Headquarters, notify state police.
I've got him.
Where do you have?
South on 32.
He headed down Brickell Avenue to the Bristol Towers, one of Miami's most exclusive condominium communities. It had been robbed before, so security at the towers was tight. The detectives waited for James to make his move. Then they lost him. They split up to cover more ground.
I can't see anything.
A security guard spotted Detective Hallman. Hallman offered his badge and asked him if he had seen anything suspicious.
Short guy.
An hour had passed with no sign of James.
Nothing up here? No, nothing at all.
Detective Hallman returned to the front of the building just in time. James was getting away.
That's our guy, that's our guy. Let's go!
They called in the highway patrol.
528 dispatch.
James was pulled over for speeding. Police discovered he was driving with a suspended license and had violated his parole. But his troubles were just beginning. On the console was the evidence they needed.
Need anything?
One item, a bracelet, was engraved with the name of a Bristol Towers victim. Initially, Derek James was charged with 1 count each of grand theft and burglary. But even unmasked, the Spider-Man remained an intriguing character. Part of his mystique stemmed from the fact that he appeared so ordinary. He was never extravagant or flashy. His neighbors never suspected that he was a master cat burglar. He had used his wealth to buy properties, which he kept well maintained. He was apparently a conscientious landlord. His audacious reputation was capped when the media revealed that his girlfriend was an ex-probation officer.
Just the way that he was able to walk around and buy all these properties, act like a real estate mogul, the way that he was even dating a probation officer was fascinating to me, because most of the time you would expect a burglar to try and stay away from people who are connected to law enforcement.
To make sure he appeared in court, Spider-Man's bail was set at $1 million. At a jailhouse news conference, James vehemently denied being the Spider-Man. He insisted he didn't have the physique for that kind of work. He said he won his wealth at the track. With James in jail, the condominium burglaries stopped. Miami and all of southern Florida became a little less jittery. Peace returned to paradise. Spider-Man's trial lasted just over a week. A Miami jeweler sealed his fate when he testified that Derek James had sold him $8 million worth of jewelry over 4 years. On December 8, 1998, James was convicted of burglary and grand theft in the Bristol Towers case. He was sentenced to 30 years, 20 of them mandatory. Derek James still faces charges in Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, Boca Raton, and Cocoa Beach, Florida. The tangled tale of Spider-Man is just beginning to unravel.